This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Coragen Max insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. Coragen Max insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and, of course, Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, Canada, the U.S., or beyond. It is great to have you with us here today. Well, a lot happened on Tuesday. A big day. Yes, we have a budget in Canada, and we're going to have Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture join us here today to fully break it down and find out what were the highlights, what were the lowlights, what were the things that were completely omitted. And I can tell you there's some things on that list that were omitted that were expected to be mentioned and previously probably would have been, especially when it comes to things around the sustainability file, which is a little bit interesting. So we're going to talk to Kelvin about that. We're also going to be joined today by Jacob Shapiro of Cognitive Investments. He joins me once a month for the Frontlines podcast. We're going to talk about we always talk about geopolitical issues. Today we're going to focus on Israel, Iran, Hamas, and try to get an update and a better understanding of what exactly is happening here. And more importantly, where does this lead us to? It's a pretty long podcast that I did with him. So we're going to play about 12, 13 minutes of it. Okay. That'll give you a bit of a taste, and you'll want to go to realagriculture.com to listen to the full thing. We'll also have time today for the top ag news stories of the day, as well as, Landon Fahlman will be joining us from Farm Credit Canada to talk about AgExpert as well in a product spotlight. So lots to chat about here today on this Wednesday. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you are also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Well, in Alberta, they've rolled out new rules as it pertains to Class 1 licenses. And there's going to be a farm exemption for those, I think, within a certain distance. So we have a poll up at realagriculture.com. Would love your opinion on it and see what you think. There's really only 3 options here, so it is fairly easy to participate in the poll. Not a lot of thinking. So 1, yes, it makes perfect sense. 2, no farmer should have to complete the same training as anyone else. Or 3, I'm undecided. It depends on the details or restrictions. So go to realagriculture.com, scroll down on the homepage, and you'll see the poll. And would appreciate you participating. So we get a bit of just a real quick idea where you stand on, of course, some of these issues. And Class 1 licenses, that is something that is always a contentious issue. As we see farms grow in size, there's more and more farms looking to use trucks that you need a Class 1 license for. The issue has been the time to wait for them, the cost to get the license, and things like that in that area. So please vote in the poll, realagriculture.com, and of course, scroll to the bottom. Speaking of realagriculture.com, you really should be signing up for our emails that go out every day. So we do a Ontario update and we do a Western Canadian update, which is essentially for the prairies. And what you can do is go to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Choose any of the emails that we're sending out on a daily basis. We also have some weekly emails as well, like our machinery email on Saturdays, the cattle email on Mondays, the dairy email on Mondays. So there's a lot of things for you to choose from. We've actually got a new one up there. I think it's up. The Mind Your Farm Business email list. It's an email that's going to go on a regular basis. That's all to do with farm management. Pretty cool stuff. So we've got the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, as well as some columns and some stories all around farm management. So that's one you're not going to want to miss. So that's Mind Your Farm Business. You can find that on that and all the emails that we send out. But like I said, by going to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Okay, let's take a break, and we're going to bring in Jacob Shapiro of Cognitive Investments. We're going to talk about what's going on between Israel and Iran, and then we're going to keep on rolling all the way to the top ag news stories of the day. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products. Each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's Koch ag.ca.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. The deadline for the sign-up for AgriStability is now April 30th. Thanks to recent program changes, AgriStability coverage levels have improved significantly for 2024. To gain a better understanding of how AgriStability and other programs can improve your farm's financial risk management plan, visit mmp.ca. What we're going to do right now is, it's not necessarily a agricultural issue, but it very much does have effects that do carry over into our industry. And it's a growing situation in the Middle East that continues to feel like it's escalating. Here to kind of break through what's how we should look at this and what are some of the variables that could happen going forward in the Middle East is Jacob Shapiro. He is with Cognitive Investments. He's based in New Orleans, and every month we host a Frontlines podcast. Here's a portion of that conversation. But I think today we're going to focus in on what's exactly going on in the Middle East. As for those of us that follow it from afar, aren't experts in the field, it feels like it's becoming a heightened situation of complexity. And I was with some friends on the weekend, and everybody just sort of did the woof, sort of the gravity of the situation as we heard what Iran had launched drones on Israel. I guess what started this back and forth? Did Israel strike on some Iranian targets?
Oh gosh, what started this? Well, first of all, let me give you a little anecdote. So it was my wife and I's 5th wedding anniversary on Saturday. And my phone started blowing up about 2 hours before we were supposed to go to dinner. And because, Iran, whatever else. And she looked at me and she said, do we have to cancel? Do we need to move the date? And I said, absolutely not. Let me just tweet, this is a big nothing burger, and let's go enjoy our dinner and go from there. So I was not as worried maybe necessarily as everybody else. That is not to say that there aren't important things happening here. That isn't to say that there isn't an escalatory scenario that concerns me. But I think the first thing we need to keep in mind, Iran told everyone and their mother for over 72 hours, hey, we're going to launch some rockets. We're going to launch some drones. Hey, we're doing this thing. We don't want it to escalate, but we're going to launch some things. So I'll be worried when they do the launch without telling everybody ahead of time, not when they're doing the launch. That is very, very clearly, to your point, a response to something Israel did around April 1st. It's funny, when you ask, when did this start? I mean, we could go back to the ancient Persian and Israelite empires if you want, but the answer to
that is not what I know.
I know, and we don't have time, but I mean, I can do that too. But no, you're exactly right. Israel assassinated an Iranian general who was in Syria at an Iranian consulate in Syria, which that's like striking Iranian territory. I think it's a little rich. The United States is now telling Israel that it needs to not do that sort of thing anymore, because the U.S. did that to Soleimani in a certain sense under the Trump administration, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But yes, Israel assassinated an Iranian general at an Iranian consulate inside of Syria, and Iran felt like it needed to respond. And by the way, that Israeli strike, in sharp contrast to what the Iranians just did, Israel didn't tell anybody about it. And the United States has expressed to Israel since then, hey, you can't do that because it's going to have impacts on our own, U.S. troop forces in Iraq and in Jordan and all these other places. So give us a heads up next time. We thought we're supposed to be allies sharing information. So Iran's missiles and drones, I think, were a tit-for-tat response to that assassination of that Iranian general. Now, I do think there are interesting things that are like, why did Iran choose to do what it did? What did Iran learn? Was this a success for Iran? We can get into that too, because I think that there is a lot to get into there, but that's at least the cause of what happened.
So I do want to get into the why. I've seen a few members of our audience, sort of tweeting about, or Xing, I guess we should say, about the matter, and everybody wondering, like, what's Iran's strategy here? Why did they notify everybody for the 72 hours? Was it to say, hey, we're going to do this, please shoot them down, which was actually the end result by Israel and some of the allies?
Well, Iran doesn't want escalation. Look at Iranian oil production over the last couple of years. They've finally gotten above 3 million barrels per day. They're finally putting some hard currency in their coffers. The economy is finally not a disaster. It's a little bit better than a disaster. So there's a lot of reasons why Iran doesn't want an escalatory scenario. Go back, I think the last time we were on front lines was right when that Iranian proxy had killed some U.S. soldiers in Iraq. And remember, Iran basically called the proxy and said, no, don't do that. It's okay for the Houthis to shoot off some missiles in the Red Sea, but we don't want you killing U.S. soldiers. That takes us down a dark path that we don't want to go to. So yeah, I think they were warning because they didn't want the escalatory situation. But I also think they were able to achieve some aims, even though they warned everybody. One of the things I've been struck by is both in Israeli and Western media, there's a level of smugness about, like Israel's missile defense, it worked. It was able to defeat the Iranians. This was a terrible, Iran has no capability and things like that. I don't see it that way at all. Iran just showed that it can basically shut down the Israeli economy when it threatens to bomb it. It showed, I think, that it has the potential to oversaturate Israel's missile defense capabilities. So imagine if they fired double the number of drones and rockets and missiles that they fired. Imagine that they didn't tell the United States in advance, so the United States couldn't pre-position some of its anti-missile capabilities, which it did in this particular case to help the Israelis shoot them down. Like suddenly Iran is telling you, hey, if you mess with us, like we can mess with you. You're not just going to get to assassinate our generals and we're not going to do sort of anything else. I think the other interesting part of this is that Iran also just showed that if it telegraphs a maneuver like this, it can get the U.S. Navy, like I said, to pre-position assets. It can get the eye of the United States military to focus squarely on the Middle East. And who are Iran's biggest partners right now? Well, Russia's the biggest one. Iran is exporting a lot of drones and rockets and that to the Russian economy. China's a little bit more of a fair weather friend, but they sell a lot of that oil to China. And if you're in a multipolar world, China and Iran have some things in common. It's wonderful for Iran to know that it can flip a switch and the United States is going to get focused on the Middle East. What can Russia do with information like that? What can China do with information like that? If you know that, hey, we can attract the attention of this power that is our rival, like we could do something over here while you guys go and do something else. Like, I think that's also a really important thing for Iran to learn. So I think they were showing off capabilities. I think they were testing the resolve of Israel's allies. And I think that they were trying to do all that without escalating. And I think they achieved that. The last thing I know I've gone on for a little bit of a longer spiel here, but I'll just say this is also keeping with Iran's strategy since October 7th. Just look at what the Houthis have done in the Red Sea. We've talked about this before too. Iran is showing you we have proxies. We can make things more difficult for you. We can make things more costly for you. You can't just fire a couple of missiles at us and our proxies and us are going to go away. No, we're going to push back. We're going to fight back. Get ready for a bigger fight if you want to do these things with us. So that, I think, is what Iran was pushing. And I think in that sense, like, they can claim some successes in a way that the West maybe doesn't want it to.
Israel has said that they intend to retaliate against Iran for those drone attacks. I read in a couple different publications. The UK's David Cameron, one of the people carrying that message. Do we expect them to do that, or are they just going to talk about it to establish the threat that it's possible?
I'd be shocked if they didn't respond in some meaningful way, but the question is whether they're going to respond in an escalatory way. If they decide to hit a bunch of Iranian proxies in Syria or go after Hezbollah or something like that, that's not an escalation. The escalation would be if they go and hit sort of Iranian military installations in Iranian territory. And this is why I'm much more concerned about what Israel is going to do next than I was with Iran's telegraphed attack. And the reason is because it seems to me that just about every actor involved in this conflict has an incentive to de-escalate, except Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the prime minister of Israel. It seems to me that for him, the longer the war goes on, the longer he has to avoid corruption charges, the longer he has to avoid investigations into the security failure in October in Israel, the longer he gets to cling to power in Israel. So he's the one that bothers me because he's the one that I can't quite predict. You're also seeing at the top levels of the Israeli government serious disagreement between Netanyahu, between his defense minister, between Benny Gantz, who's the opposition figure who came into the coalition to prosecute the war. He's now publicly, and privately apparently disagreeing with Netanyahu, and there's differences about what the military strategy should be. Is he going to leave the coalition so that he can bring the government down and challenge him? Like all of these things make Israel's next move worried me a little bit more than what Iran has just done. My bet, I think the base case is still yes, they'll respond, but they'll go after proxies. They will do something that is not going to cause Iran to then escalate further. But I'm less sure of that than I was sure that I didn't think Iran's attack on Israel was going to be that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Is it fair to say that President Biden lacks influence on the actions of Prime Minister Netanyahu?
That's a difficult question to answer. I mean, President Biden and the United States in general has a lot of influence. The fact that Iran felt the need to tell the United States what it was going to do ahead of time.
Right.
That's a form of influence right there. Like that's even, Iran is telling the great Satan what it's going to do. Like that's a remarkable sign of influence from two countries that really don't deal with each other that much. And I do think that Biden has some influence over Benjamin Netanyahu and has been able to constrain some of his actions. But Biden's also in a weak position right now. He's going into election season, and Netanyahu had a very good relationship with Trump. So maybe if you're Netanyahu, you're just trying to, delay until maybe Trump is going to win again. And then you get somebody in the White House who's willing to deal with you a little bit more. So, I mean, Israel's going to do what it's going to do no matter what the United States says, and Netanyahu is going to do whatever he thinks he needs to do no matter what the United States says. But yes, when Biden, and he reportedly, called Netanyahu after Israel shot down all the rockets and stuff, and at least the reporting was he told Netanyahu some version of, okay, you got to win. Take the win. Stop there. We are not going to help you if you escalate the situation. So I at least think that Biden has gotten the message through, like, okay, like you can do a tit for tat response. But if you bomb Iranian territory and you're expecting us to deploy the aircraft carriers to help you, you are sorely mistaken. We're not going to do that. So in that sense, like, yes, that's influence because now Netanyahu has to sort of, well, are they bluffing? Would they actually help me if we got into that kind of conflict? Or is it really worth it to risk that? Maybe I'll just do the tit for tat thing and I've gotten what I wanted out of everything else, which is everybody's talking about Iran and not about the plight of the Palestinians anymore on the PR front.
Yeah. Well, President Biden had also said to Iran, no. I think it was like something like that in terms of the retaliation that went disregarded as well to some extent, I guess. So Israel has said that they will not end the fighting until Hamas is annihilated. Hamas has said they will not release the hostages without a truce that includes a clear path to end the war. Are either of the, like, what's the probability on either of those having getting across the finish line?
I don't think the annihilation of Hamas is a realistic goal. It reminds me of the United States war on terror. You can't defeat terror. You could kill every single senior member of Hamas, and sort of the ideological Muslim Brotherhood component of it, the framework would still be there. So you would just get new leaders calling themselves Hamas or something else with the same ideology in that group. So I don't know how you annihilate Hamas. And as for Hamas, anything that Hamas says, if you're an Israeli negotiator, like how are you supposed to take that after what they did on October 7th? It's really hard to sort of build any trust there. And these Gulf countries, especially Qatar, have been trying. They've been trying to get the two sides to talk to each other, trying to get some form of ceasefire on the table, and it's just not working. Remember, Hamas is also not a monolith. It seems clear in the aftermath of October of last year that some factions of Hamas were surprised at what happened and are not necessarily happy with what happened because of the death and destruction that it's brought on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. There are others, the ones who were the masterminds behind the attack, who this is what they wanted. They want martyrdom. They want to be a rallying cry. They want the Muslim world to be supporting them in this meaningful way. So no, I think the depressing answer to your question is I don't see that we're anywhere close to a ceasefire, and it seems clear that Israel is going to go into Rafah and is going to, eviscerate every single part of the Gaza Strip, and then it's going to try to declare victory in some way, and it's going to be a Pyrrhic one. Like it's not actually going to be able to control the Gaza Strip meaningfully. And I'm shocked a little bit at how Israel can get in this position. I mean, we've seen how the IDF is not equipped for these kind of police actions or long-term occupations. We saw it in Lebanon in the early 1980s. We've seen it in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip for literally decades, and they think this is going to end any different just because they killed some more militants and sacrificed more of their soldiers. Like, I don't exactly know what the strategic thought is. It doesn't look like strategy to me.
That was Jacob Shapiro of Cognitive Investments, based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Every month, Jacob and I co-host the Frontlines podcast that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. There's probably about 10 to 15 more minutes in that conversation. Go to realagriculture.com as well to see the whole, or hear the whole thing, I should say. Very, very concerning, very grave situation that, as he discussed, it's hard to see at this point a path to a quick resolution to this conflict for sure. Hey, when we come back on Real Ag Radio, we've got a product spotlight. We're going to hear from Farm Credit Canada. You're listening to Real Ag Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. It's time for today's product spotlight. I'm Lindsay Smith, and joining me is Landon Fahlman. He's the senior product owner with AgExpert. Welcome here, Landon.
Thanks for having me today.
All right, so we're going to talk about AgExpert. First, let's give us an overview. What is AgExpert?
Sure, yeah. AgExpert is a cost production tool designed to help Canadian farmers digitize their records. And so inside of that, we are solving the problem of not having an accurate snapshot of your cost per acre to make decisions. And so AgExpert is broken into two products. We've got accounting software catered to the ag industry, and then we've got AgExpert Field, which is an operational overview of your entire farm, tracking day-to-day operations and cost per acre.
Now, of course, digital tools are there to enhance the decision-making process. How can farmers use AgExpert to do just that?
Yeah, there's some key points with this. I think what it can do is it reduces error within trying to keep paper records. Next, it always has an up-to-date cost of production. As you move through the software, you're constantly keeping that data updated and having that data in the palm of your hands. And then you're able to input your data once and use it in multiple places. So whether that be via our partner network or in different parts of the platform, you're able to input it once and use it a couple different places to get value out of.
Now, so what then is the significance of interconnected data when it comes to operational decisions? How key is that? How important is that?
It's important. I think having a lot of nowadays the ag tools are all pretty interconnected. Lots of partnerships are happening now with different products, and so it's a huge time saver and a huge value prop for the customer because they're, like I said before, you're able to kind of put your data in once and use it multiple places, and so that side of it is just becoming stronger and better for the customer to kind of have their tools that they use on their farm be tied together more. It just allows consistent data as well to be shared. Now, that being said, it's definitely up to us in the industry to keep those integrations solid and simple for the user.
Mm-hmm. And also, which brings us to our next point, also secure. And this is, a question that many farmers have. How do you ensure that farmers remain in control of their data when they're inputting this data? They're obviously allowing some of it to be shared between some platforms, but how do you ensure that farmers stay in control of that data?
Yeah, good question. This is something that we feel really strongly about, so much so that in 2018 we became the first Canadian software company to receive the Ag Data Transparent certification. And so what that is it's basically a certification that protects customers' data by setting guidelines for how companies can collect, store, and analyze and use their data. And so there's all kinds of protocols and different things that we need to meet in order to get that certification. And so we're very proud to be the first one to do that. And among now, many companies are also having that certification as well.
Now, AgExpert, as you mentioned, you've got sort of the accounting side and then also the field level operations side for this particular product. What's next for AgExpert? Where do you see this product going and evolving?
Yeah, we're just continuing on our pursuit for the most accurate cost of production tool on the market. So we're just continuing to build our product network as well as further integrating our two products, field and accounting. And so tying those two platforms together just to really tie the financial side of your operation with the operational side and allow you to have all those data points and expenses and different pieces tying together for you to make decisions. So anything we're doing now and going forward feeds into our mission of making record keeping touchless and automated. That's really where we're headed. And so everything that we kind of do is catered towards that.
All right. And for farmers who are interested in learning more about AgExpert, where can we send them?
Yeah, go ahead and visit agexpert.ca. You're able to make a free basic account within 30 to 40 seconds. You can get in there and take a look around and see how AgExpert can help you. And if you choose to take the next step with us, we'll set up a training call with you to help you walk through getting started and how it can best serve your business.
Wonderful. All right, Landon, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure Oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday for agronomically effective dual UAN inhibition. The smart answer is, of course, you know it. It is Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how its 2 active ingredients protect the UAN from 3 forms of nitrogen loss, you can visit kochag.ca. Joining us right now is Real Agriculture's own, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. It is Kelvin Heppner. Hey, Kelvin, how's it going?
Doing well here, Shaun. Happy day after budget day. Is that something we celebrate?
Do we get the day off then? Is that what we're maybe a cup of coffee and a cookie and then on with the, yeah. So I guess what is the aftermath? We saw the government release a lot of the details pre-budget as they continue to battle the political declines in the or approval rating, approval ratings in the polls. What's the take post-budget?
Well, this is a tax and spend budget, more taxes and more spending. And so we finally, yesterday, I think some of the bottom line numbers were new yesterday in terms of new information. We'd seen the government over the last number of weeks announce a lot of different specific initiatives regarding housing and school food program and those types of things. Now we actually got to see some of the bottom lines, and that includes a nearly $40 billion deficit for this year. Debt servicing is going to take up a larger piece of the government pie, with debt payments expected to make up around 10% of total government expenditures in the upcoming year. Wow. So just some of those big picture numbers that kind of is the backdrop for a budget that sure, the deficit is actually on target for what they talked about last year and last fall in the economic statement, right around that $40 billion mark. But they've done that so they've increased spending, but they've also increased tax revenue to keep that deficit at that point. So more taxes and more spending, I think, sums it up.
So not exactly converting themselves into fiscal hawks, so to speak.
No, I think this is more of the same. This is the Trudeau government doubling down on the government is here to solve all your problems type of messaging. And that's something that has kind of gotten them into the place where they are right now in the polls. And so there's certainly an overarching message here too. And even the name of the budget, it talked about fairness, tax fairness for different generations. So Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland emphasized in her messaging around the budget yesterday that this is about giving younger generations more advantages and helping them out, helping them feel like they're not under the thumb of older generations kind of thing. So that, in other words, could be perceived as tax wealth redistribution, not so much wealth creation. And that's where a lot of the concerns are coming from in the agriculture sector as well as in the broader business community.
Yeah, we seem to be kind of defeatist on how we deal with some of these things. And I agree with you in terms of the perceptions of, hey, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And instead of creating a platform to spark the drive of individuals to reach some of these end goals that we have as a country. So, okay, agriculture, did it fit into this budget at all?
I would say in general, after having covered quite a few of these federal budgets in the past, this budget probably had as least or the lowest amount of agricultural content that I can remember in terms of new initiatives. Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know if that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your perception or what you wanted to see. I know farm groups certainly Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Grain Growers of Canada, the Wheat Growers, Canadian Cattle Association, some mixed messages and a lot of disappointment about what was not in the budget, what was not mentioned. So considering that there was this big increase in spending, a lot of things didn't get funding that people were hoping to see. Going back to that overall theme, though, Shaun, of perhaps being a bit down on ourselves or hurting ourselves, shooting ourselves in the foot kind of thing, the expanded capital gains tax is something that is certainly getting a lot of attention today, the day after the budget, as a disincentive to investment in capital for small businesses, and that includes farms across Canada. So one of the big changes yesterday that was announced is that they're going to be increasing the inclusion rate on annual capital gains from 1/2 to 2/3. So this is the portion of a capital gain if somebody sells their second home, or if somebody sells farmland that they bought years ago and it's increased in value. That capital gain, until now, 1/2 of it was taxable. Now it's going to increase to 2/3 being taxable. And so for individuals, the higher rate would only apply to capital gains above 250,000. But for corporations, it will apply to all capital gains realized, that higher rate. They have at the same time, to maybe soften the blow, and this is something that farmers are certainly quite familiar with, the lifetime capital gains exemption. Yep. They have increased that. It was just over $1 million, and it is effective June 25th. It will be increasing to 1.25 million, and will be continued to be indexed to inflation thereafter. So that, I think, is a positive thing that groups like the Canadian Federation of Agriculture are welcoming that increase to the lifetime capital gains exemption.
There was even mentions of some of the topics that we do discuss here on a regular basis. One of the words that came up that kind of surprised me, and maybe not you, is interoperability. How did that work itself into the budget?
Well, it was almost a copy and paste paragraph from last year's budget. So the government plans to launch consultations in June on interoperability so that farmers can use their equipment in the way that is best for their farm. That was a quote from the budget. It also referred to this being a tool in helping lower food costs, because there was a sentence that drew some high criticism in the budget yesterday that referred to farmers, when they buy new equipment, it's expensive, and so that cost is passed down to the checkout counter, and so food costs increase as a result. So I don't know if that's how farming actually works, or at least whoever wrote the budget doesn't have a great understanding, obviously. So last year's budget, though, included a similar pledge. So this has to do with different brands of equipment not working together, and government wants to crack down on making sure that there are reduced barriers when it comes to farmers being able to hook up different types of equipment together. So that, I think, is something that most farmers welcome. It's something, again, that I'm not sure it has a direct correlation with food costs, especially for a government that denies that a carbon tax has anything to do with food costs.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hypocrisy there. That's a good point by yourself, for sure. Any expansion of things like some of the business risk management programs or sustainable ag strategy or any of that kind of programming?
No, that was one thing that was notably absent. There was a line in there about the government is consulting with stakeholders like the Canadian Cattle Association on risk management for livestock producers and producers when they go through disaster situations, that type of thing, which the CCA took as a positive commitment from the government. It remains to be seen what kind of follow through there will be on that. But it was kind of actually surprising. The Trudeau government has historically used the budget to announce new climate-related programs over the last number of years, whether it's the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, the Agricultural Clean Technology Fund, the Sustainable Ag Strategy, which you mentioned. And I couldn't find any mention of any of those initiatives, and that included new funding for any of those initiatives in the budget. So that's an example of where, despite increased spending, we didn't see discussion or even new funding for some of those programs. That's something we'll have to stay tuned or follow up on, what the future of those programs looks like if there isn't new funding coming for them announced in the budget. Some groups are also hoping to see action on the Canada Grain Act in the budget, as after about a year ago, we saw former federal Ag Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau say that she wanted to see legislative or regulatory reform to the Canada Grain Act or the related regulations by the end of 2023. Well, that date came and went. We saw a change in Ag Minister. And so I think there was some expectation that maybe there would be some mention of plans on this file in the budget. And Grain Growers of Canada, the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association were both disappointed to not see anything about the Canada Grain Act in the budget. Also, no mention of the extended rail interswitching pilot that was announced last year. Whether that will be continued, that was also not referred to in the budget yesterday.
From getting outside the agricultural bubble, what has been the reaction from analysts and economists and people that follow these kinds of things on a regular basis? Is this budget getting praise, criticism? Where does it kind of land?
Well, I think it depends on the context in which you're coming from. This is a clear effort by the government to appeal to younger voters. I don't know whether this will be enough to move the needle. There's a lot of different programs with big names, and just it's just overwhelming figuring out what you have 100 different programs. You've got the housing accelerator funds, and artificial intelligence investment, and all these different areas that the government is investing in, and it's hard to know what that actually means practically on the ground to an average typical voter. So I do see some challenges there, and then in terms of the business community, there's certainly a lot of criticism when it comes to increases to the capital gains tax inclusion rate and the competitiveness, how this could hurt competitiveness of Canadian business, and how we could see investment in capital shift elsewhere. Some of the accounting firm analysis that I've seen so far shows on like a provincial, depends on which province you're in, what that higher and tax bracket rate is. But this change to the capital gains tax could increase the tax rate on that capital gain anywhere from 7 to 9% in most provinces is kind of what I've seen. So right away that could it impacts competitiveness, and also I expect a lot of these things are only expected to take effect end of June 25th. So we could see, I'm guessing there will be some people trying to realize those capital gains before the higher inclusion rate takes effect.
Yeah, a real rush job on, how we were thinking about selling our business. Now. It could be a real busy couple months here for accountants and lawyers.
Yeah, so business community, I would say, is negative. People who are really concerned and following the housing file closely say there's some good stuff in here that could potentially make a difference. But again, some of the government's targets are like they need record housing construction for the next 7 years or for a really long time, every year to actually reach some of these targets. So not completely realistic, but yeah. So, and there's also the school food program, which I'm not sure anybody can really have a strong argument against. And so in many ways, I think the Trudeau government has tried to, this budget is really an election budget. It's the last one that they will actually have a chance at implementing and having take effect and people notice before an election, which has to happen, of course, by in less than a year and a half. And so I think there's some surprises in here in terms of there was no huge, at least in my opinion, I guess maybe it depends on which files people are following, but no huge attention grabbing topics or announcements that could swing an election, in my opinion, or even change the tone. We've seen the polls leading up to the election, despite all these announcements, the polls basically unchanged with the Conservatives, even at their largest lead ever, or in the last number of years, a 20% lead in the polls, which we talked about on Friday's show. So I'm not sure that this will move the needle a whole lot.
Yeah, one thing that doesn't make sense to me over the long term is I could get my head wrapped around raising, trying to increase revenue through taxation, but cutting spending, because then at least it feels like you're cutting away at this deficit. They're just, they don't have it in them. They do not have it in them to cut spending.
And again, a higher borrowing cost environment, more of the federal funds are going to debt payments, debt servicing. It's going to exceed 10% of federal expenditures, they said. So
absolutely,
that's a significant amount too.
Kelvin, thanks a lot for joining us here. Really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, everybody. Make sure you go to RealAgriculture.com and keep up to speed. We're going to have more stories coming out about the reaction to the budget and some pieces we pull out. There's a lot of stuff in there for sure. Kelvin, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Shaun.
That is Kelvin Heppner, of course, of Real Agriculture, and you're also gonna hear him on Fridays as usual. As we got a great panel set up. Ryan Keurig from MMP, tax specialist MMP, will be with us to talk about those capital gains changes and some of the impacts. We'll also be joined by Tyler McCann of Cappy, Kelvin, and Lindsay as usual. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with top ag news stories of the day right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day, which is, of course, brought to you by New Farm. And listen, you got to check out the pre-emergent soil active herbicides like Belterra EZ and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. Spray after spring thaw for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control this spring. Find out more by going to newfarm.ca. They got a great website full of a listing of all the products. Contact your local retailer, talk to your local New Farm rep, and of course, you can find all that by going to newfarm.ca. Okay, we've covered the budget. A lot of reaction in some of the mainstream publications or on TV, and Kelvin did a great job summarizing all that. One of the other things we've been chatting about here lots on the show is the divergent paths potentially for interest rates when it comes to Canada and the United States. And we've been having some fun debate on the Real Ag Issues panel the past number of weeks about this. Story in the Globe here this morning, the Fed has maintained that it needs greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2% before it would be appropriate to ease policy, according to Federal Reserve Chairman Powell. That was said at the Wilson Center think tank. He was quoted as saying, the recent data has clearly not given us greater confidence and instead indicates that it's likely to take longer than expected to achieve that confidence. The Canadian economy has stumbled in recent months as it contends with a benchmark interest rate at 5%, the highest in more than 2 decades, while the U.S. has even higher interest rates. Its economy is still growing at a pretty rapid clip, and inflation has recently picked up again. After the Stats Can report, traders ramped up their bets that the Bank of Canada will start to lower rates in June. If not then, July is considered a certainty. Investors aren't expecting the Fed to make its move until September or November. That's going to have an impact on the currency exchange. We're going to see a drop in the Canadian dollar. And the story concludes, a divergent path for interest rates would likely weaken the Canadian dollar relative to the greenback. This would be helpful for exporters, but would also raise the cost of imported goods, which some are arguing actually re-sparks inflation in Canada. Now, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde expressed a different stance compared to Powell in an interview with CNBC. Lagarde indicated that the ECB is still planning to lower interest rates soon, barring any significant shocks. So it does seem outside of the U.S., we're headed to lower rates sooner than later. But the U.S. possibly could even be pushed to the fall. So there's divergent paths here, not just between Canada and the U.S., but other areas of the G7 as well. In terms of HPAI, I should say, or some are saying BPAI, USDA assures minimal trade disruptions amid HPAI concerns. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack reassured that there haven't been significant disruptions in dairy trade despite the discovery of highly pathogenic avian influenza in the U.S. in some of the parts of the dairy herd. Vilsack stated that most trading partners haven't halted imports of U.S. dairy products, with only a few expressing concerns. Of course, an important piece of this, and whether we're talking about swine, we're talking about beef animals, or in this case where we have seen infection, which is dairy, there is no indications that there is any threat to the safety of food. So that continues to be one of the most critical points of this whole discussion. You heard Lindsay yesterday in her interview with the scientist from CFIA. Pasteurization does mitigate the virus, so there is that. Key points in the food safety discussion for sure. Also got some statements yesterday from the Canadian Cattle Association restating that there has been no infections found in the U.S. or in Canada when it comes to beef animals, only dairy animals. There continues to be stringent testing. and reaffirming again this messaging about food safety. On trade, the WTO chief has talked about the free-for-all under Trump's tariff hike plan. The head of the World Trade Organization warns that former President Donald Trump's proposal to increase tariffs on U.S. imports could trigger a global trade free-for-all. She predicts that other nations would retaliate in kind, leading to instability and unpredictability in trade. Trump's plan includes imposing 60% tariffs on imports from China and 10% from other countries, which could potentially raise inflation above the Federal Reserve's target. We just can't seem to escape inflation. So from an agriculture perspective, this continues to be being watched with a really great interest, because one of the pieces to this would be, now, if President Trump, or if Trump is reelected as president, becomes President Trump again, do we see him go forward with this policy? All indications are yes. The question is, will there be carve-outs for agriculture? Meaning, for example, Canadian live cattle going to the U.S., would they have the 10% tariff or would they not? Like those kinds of questions. And I've had differing opinions on that don't expect carve-outs. Don't expect exemptions. That seems to be some of the common thought in some of the agricultural community, something that farm groups in Canada are of course watching very closely, as well as the auto sector, the steel sector alike. House Ag Chair Thompson gets sensitive and critical regarding upcoming farm bill details. Speaking to ag journalists on Tuesday, House Ag Chair G.T. Thompson, a Republican from Pennsylvania, said this regarding a new farm bill. A lot of this bill, quite frankly, has been written. We've found some pretty creative ways to be able to fund what I think would be a transformational and highly effective farm bill, Thompson said. Then he threw it at the end, a bit of a kicker. Anyone who criticizes our funding framework is either being ignorant of the details or being disingenuous. Many think the farm bill in the U.S. is going to find a 2025 date for completion, continues to struggle to find any sort of progress. There's been some cuts to some of the reports that USDA does. And you know, it's interesting because we're coming off a budget day in Canada, and I wonder how long it'll be. And we have way less regular reporting in Canada than they do in the US. I've been in the opinion, I wish we did have the level of reporting that they have in the US when it comes to things like on a weekly basis, like, you know, exports or some of the inventory, like just way more regular. The more information, the better, the better it is for the market, you know, in my opinion. So we have seen some cuts, and USDA's meeting focusing on cuts to data reports. At USDA's spring data users meeting, the decision to withhold county estimates for the 2024 growing season and discontinue the July cattle report was a major topic. NASS officials explained these choices were driven by budget constraints rather than shifting funds to other projects. The American Farm Bureau, President Zippy Duvall, he was critical, saying the USDA decision to cut some reports is not supported. In a letter to USDA, Duvall said the decision to cancel the July cattle report runs counter to previous commitments to improve fair, competitive, and transparent markets. It's kind of what a lot of people are arguing here. I wonder how long it is till we see further cuts in this area on both sides of the border, as you know. But I do hear from some producers that think there's no value to things like the prospective planting reporters, the Stats Can production report, and then when the reports go away, people are upset about it. So they're definitely, I think more of this is going to be coming. I wonder if it does open up the opportunity for more private reporting, though will be looked upon differently than some of these. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I just think this is kind of the trend that we're going to have to be following. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer today.